There is a silence that comes from peace, and there is a silence that comes after too much pain. A woman does not become silent because she has nothing to say. She becomes silent when she finally understands that explaining herself to people who refuse to understand is a waste of life energy. Many people fear loud words, but wise people fear silence, because silence is not weakness. Silence is distance. Silence is the moment the heart closes the door without making noise. Silence is often deeper than anger, because anger is visible, but silence carries the weight of everything a person has already endured. Anger can appear in a moment. Silence is built over time. It is created through disappointment, patience, emotional exhaustion, and deep realization. Many people react loudly when they are hurt. They argue, they defend themselves, they try to make others understand their pain. But there comes a moment in life when a woman begins to understand something powerful. Not every battle deserves her voice. Not every misunderstanding deserves her explanation. Not every disrespect deserves her reaction. That understanding changes everything. A conscious woman does not become silent because she is weak. She becomes silent because she has learned the cost of wasting energy on people who are committed to misunderstanding her. She understands that some people listen only to respond, not to understand. And when this truth becomes clear, silence becomes wisdom. There is a stage in emotional maturity where a woman stops trying to prove her worth. She no longer feels the need to explain her intentions again and again. She realizes that genuine people do not require endless explanations to respect her heart. Anger often seeks immediate release. Silence seeks clarity. When someone continuously disrespects a woman, ignores her value, or takes her kindness for granted, there is usually a period where she still fights for the connection. She speaks, she tries to fix things peacefully, she gives chances, she remains patient longer than most people realize. But patience also has limits, and when those limits are finally reached, silence arrives. That silence is not coldness. It is self-protection. A woman who becomes silent has often cried in private more times than anyone knows. She has replayed conversations in her mind, she has questioned herself, she has hoped for change. But eventually, she reaches a level of awareness where she understands that constantly forcing understanding destroys inner peace. At that point, silence becomes stronger than anger ever could be, because anger still carries emotional attachment. Silence often means detachment has begun, and detachment is powerful. When a woman no longer reacts to disrespect, manipulation, or emotional games, it means she has started reclaiming control over her energy. She no longer allows temporary emotions to dominate her spirit. She becomes calm, centered, and observant. This is why silence can make people uncomfortable. People expect noise, they expect reactions, they expect emotional chaos. But silence removes access. Silence creates distance, and in that distance, truth becomes visible. A disciplined woman understands that her energy is sacred. Every unnecessary argument drains the mind. Every attempt to convince unwilling people weakens the spirit. So instead of fighting endlessly, she chooses stillness. Stillness is not surrender. Stillness is mastery. There's great strength in remaining calm when emotions are heavy. Anyone can shout when they are angry, but maintaining dignity while carrying pain requires deep inner discipline. And this discipline changes the entire direction of life. And because when a woman stops reacting to everything, she begins seeing life more clearly. She recognizes who truly values her presence and who only values her availability. She understands who brings peace into her life and who continuously brings confusion. Silence sharpens awareness. Many people lose valuable relationships because they mistake silence for weakness. They think a quiet woman will always stay. They assume patience has no limit. But a wise woman eventually understands that protecting her peace is more important than maintaining unhealthy connections. And once she reaches that understanding, her silence becomes final, not because she hates anyone, not because she wants revenge, but because her soul is tired of carrying unnecessary emotional weight. A peaceful mind is worth more than constant emotional struggle. This is why inner growth is so important. A woman who develops emotional discipline becomes very difficult to break. She no longer reacts impulsively. She no longer allows temporary emotions to control permanent decisions. She learns to pause, breathe, observe, and protect her inner balance. That balance becomes her power. In a noisy world, silence carries presence, and in a world addicted to reactions, calmness becomes rare. A woman who masters silence begins walking differently through life. She stops chasing validation. She stops begging to be understood. She starts choosing environments that nourish her spirit instead of draining it. And slowly, her silence transforms into confidence. Because true power is not always loud. Sometimes, true power is the ability to remain peaceful while walking away from what no longer aligns with your soul. That is when silence becomes deeper than anger, because anger seeks to fight, but silence has already chosen freedom. Self-respect is stronger than attachment, because attachment often makes people tolerate what their soul knows is wrong. It makes them hold on to connections that continuously drain their peace. It makes them ignore red flags, silence their intuition, and abandon their own dignity just to avoid losing someone. But a conscious woman eventually learns that losing herself is far more painful than losing another person. This realization does not come easily. It is usually born through heartbreak, disappointment, betrayal, and emotional exhaustion. At first, she may try to hold everything together. She may continue giving love even when it is not returned with sincerity. She may continue showing loyalty even when she is repeatedly disrespected, because attachment creates fear. Fear of being alone, fear of starting over, fear of letting go of memories, emotions, and hopes that once felt meaningful. But attachment without respect becomes emotional suffering. Kent, a wise woman, understands that love should never require the destruction of self-worth. Real connection should not force her to constantly beg for attention, chase basic honesty, or shrink herself to keep someone comfortable. The moment she begins sacrificing her inner peace just to maintain attachment, something sacred inside her slowly begins to disappear. And this is why self-respect matters. Self-respect is the foundation of emotional strength. It is the quiet decision to honor your value even when emotions are heavy. It is the ability to walk away from situations that continuously dishonor your spirit, that even when your heart still feels attached. That is not weakness. That is discipline. Most people confuse attachment with love, but attachment often comes from dependency, fear, loneliness, or emotional insecurity. True love does not demand self-abandonment. True love allows honesty, peace, trust, and mutual respect to grow naturally. A woman with self-respect does not lose herself inside relationships. She remains connected to her values, her boundaries, and her inner clarity because she understands something very important. If she abandons herself to keep others close, she will eventually feel empty even while surrounded by people. There are many women who stay silent about their pain because they fear losing attachment. They tolerate disrespect because they remember the good moments. They accept emotional inconsistency because they hope things will improve. But over time, carrying emotional pain becomes heavier than letting go, and eventually, the soul reaches a limit. A strong woman begins asking herself different questions. Does this connection bring peace or confusion? Does this person respect my heart or only my presence? Am I growing here or slowly disappearing? These questions awaken awareness, because once awareness enters the mind, self-respect becomes impossible to ignore. A conscious woman understands that boundaries are necessary, not to punish others, but to protect inner balance. She realizes that saying no can be an act of self-love, walking away can be an act of healing. Distance can become a form of emotional protection. This level of maturity changes how she moves through life. She no longer chases people who repeatedly show inconsistency. She no longer forces conversations where understanding does not exist. She no longer explains her value to those committed to overlooking it. Instead, she becomes calm, and calmness is powerful. There is something deeply attractive about a woman who respects herself enough to leave what continuously damages her peace. She understands that loneliness is temporary, but losing self-respect creates wounds that can remain for years. So she chooses dignity, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts, because real growth often requires painful decisions. It requires letting go of emotional attachments that no longer align with the future she desires. It requires emotional discipline strong enough to choose long-term peace over temporary comfort. This is why self-respect is stronger than attachment. Attachment says stay, even when you are suffering. Self-respect says protect your peace before your spirit breaks. Attachment fears separation. Self-respect values inner stability more than emotional dependency. A healed woman understands that her worth does not decrease because someone failed to appreciate her heart. She no longer measures her value through another person's attention or validation. She becomes rooted within herself. And once a woman becomes rooted within herself, she stops settling for less than she deserves. She starts choosing relationships that feel safe, honest, and emotionally balanced. She becomes more selective with her energy, more intentional with her time, more protective of her emotional well-being. This does not make her cold. It makes her wise because wisdom teaches a woman that not every connection is meant to stay forever. Some people enter life as lessons. Some reveal hidden wounds that still need healing. And some teach the importance of self-respect through the pain they create. But every experience can become growth if the woman chooses awareness instead of bitterness. And this is the true transformation. When a woman finally values her dignity more than unhealthy attachment, she becomes emotionally free. She no longer fears walking alone. She no longer begs for love that lacks consistency. She no longer sacrifices her standards to avoid temporary loneliness. Instead, she protects her peace with quiet confidence. Because deep inside, she now understands something powerful. The right people will never require her to betray herself in order to keep them close. Emotional discipline creates inner power because the person who controls their emotions controls the direction of their life. Most people are ruled by temporary feelings. They react instantly when they are angry. They speak without awareness when they are hurt. They make permanent decisions based on temporary emotions. And later, they suffer because they allowed emotions to lead instead of wisdom. But a conscious woman learns to pause before reacting. This pause changes everything. Emotional discipline is not about becoming emotionless. It is not about suppressing pain or pretending nothing affects you. True emotional discipline means feeling everything deeply without allowing emotions to destroy your peace, your dignity, or your clarity. A wise woman understands that emotions are powerful servants but dangerous masters. If anger controls her, she loses balance. If attachment controls her, she loses herself. If fear controls her, she stops growing. So she begins training her inner world. This training is not easy. It requires awareness every single day. And you're right. It requires observing thoughts instead of blindly following them. It requires remaining calm when life becomes difficult. And most importantly, it requires understanding that inner peace is more valuable than emotional reactions. Many people believe strength is loud. They believe power is dominance, control, or aggression. But real power is much quieter. Real power is remaining calm when others try to provoke you. Real power is staying centered during emotional chaos. Real power is refusing to let temporary negativity poison your spirit. This is emotional mastery. A disciplined woman does not react to every insult because she understands that not every opinion deserves access to her emotions. She does not waste her energy proving herself to people committed to misunderstanding her. She observes more, speaks less, protects her peace carefully because she understands that energy is life. Every unnecessary argument drains the mind. Every emotional outburst weakens inner stability. Every impulsive reaction creates more chaos within the soul. And slowly, she begins realizing something important. Peace is not found outside. Peace is created within. This realization transforms her entire life. Instead of constantly reacting to the world, she starts mastering herself. She becomes more patient, more aware, more intentional with her words and actions. She no longer allows emotions to decide who she becomes in difficult moments. This does not mean she never feels pain. She still feels disappointment. She still feels sadness. She still experiences betrayal and loneliness like every human being. But emotional discipline teaches her not to become controlled by those feelings. She learns to sit with pain without collapsing. She learns to breathe through frustration without exploding. She learns to remain graceful even when life becomes heavy. That grace becomes her strength. Most people only focus on controlling external situations. But a wise woman understands that the greatest battle is internal. Because if the mind is undisciplined, even small problems feel overwhelming. But when the mind becomes calm and focused, challenges lose their power to destroy inner balance. This is why emotional discipline creates confidence. A woman who can control herself becomes difficult to manipulate. She no longer reacts impulsively to attention, rejection, criticism, or emotional games. She becomes emotionally independent. And emotional independence is freedom. She stops needing constant validation to feel valuable. She stops allowing the mood of others to determine her peace. She stops chasing approval from people who cannot even respect themselves. Instead, she becomes rooted within her own center. This center is powerful because it creates stability in every area of life. Her decisions become clearer. Her relationships become healthier. Her energy becomes calmer. People begin feeling her presence differently because inner discipline changes the energy a person carries. A calm woman enters a room differently. A disciplined woman speaks differently. A peaceful woman moves through life differently. Not because life became easier, but because she became stronger internally, and this strength cannot be faked. It is built through silent battles nobody sees, through nights of emotional struggle, through moments where she wanted to react but chose dignity instead, through experiences that forced her to mature beyond emotional impulsiveness. Every painful experience becomes training. This is why emotionally disciplined women often become deeply wise. They stop wasting energy on things that do not matter. They stop chasing temporary emotional highs. They become more focused on protecting peace, purpose, and inner alignment. Because they understand that life becomes dangerous when emotions are uncontrolled. One emotional reaction can destroy trust. One impulsive decision can create years of regret. One moment of lost awareness can damage relationships permanently. So a conscious woman practices stillness, not weakness, not silence from fear, but calmness from mastery. She understands that true confidence is not the ability to dominate others. True confidence is the ability to remain balanced within yourself regardless of external circumstances. And once a woman reaches this level of emotional discipline, her entire presence changes. She no longer seeks chaos because peace now feels more valuable. She no longer fears loneliness because she has built strength within herself. She no longer reacts to everything because she understands that protecting her inner world is sacred. That is inner power. Not the power to control others, but the power to control yourself, even when emotions are intense. And a woman who masters herself becomes almost impossible to break. Peace is more valuable than attention because attention can be temporary, but peace protects the soul for a lifetime. Many people spend years chasing validation from others. They want to be noticed, admired, chosen, and constantly reassured of their worth. But in this endless search for attention, they slowly lose connection with themselves. A conscious woman eventually understands that not everyone who gives attention brings peace, and not everyone who praises you truly values your spirit. This realization changes the way she moves through life. At first, attention feels powerful. Being desired, admired, or constantly surrounded by people can create the illusion of happiness. It can temporarily fill emotional emptiness. But temporary attention cannot heal inner loneliness. It cannot replace self-respect. And it cannot create the deep calmness that comes from living in alignment with your soul, because attention is external, yet and peace is internal. A wise woman learns that external validation is unstable. People change their opinions quickly. Some admire you only when you are useful to them. Some give attention only when they fear losing access to your energy. Others become interested only when you begin distancing yourself. This is why emotional maturity is important. Without inner awareness, a person becomes addicted to attention. They constantly seek approval through relationships, social validation, compliments, or external recognition. Their mood becomes dependent on how others treat them. And slowly, they lose emotional stability because they place their worth in the hands of other people. But a disciplined woman chooses differently. She chooses peace over chaos. She chooses clarity over confusion. She chooses emotional stability over temporary excitement because she understands something powerful. A peaceful life is built through conscious decisions. Every person she allows close to her affects her energy. Every conversation influences her mental state. Every environment shapes her inner world, so she becomes careful about what she entertains emotionally. Not everyone deserves access to her peace. This does not mean she isolates herself from the world. It means she becomes intentional. She no longer chases people who bring inconsistency into her life. She no longer entertains connections that constantly create emotional exhaustion. She no longer sacrifices her mental calmness just to feel temporarily desired, because attention without peace eventually becomes suffering. There are many people who receive endless attention yet feel deeply empty inside. Their lives are filled with noise, but their hearts remain restless. Why? Because peace cannot be purchased through admiration, cannot be created through popularity. It comes from emotional alignment, self-respect, and inner balance. A conscious woman understands this deeply. She begins valuing quiet mornings more than meaningless conversations. She values emotional safety more than temporary excitement. She values sincere loyalty more than shallow attention from many people. This level of awareness creates transformation. Because once peace becomes the priority, life starts changing naturally. She stops forcing connections that drain her spirit. She becomes less attracted to drama, manipulation, and emotional inconsistency. Her standards rise because she understands the value of her energy, and energy is sacred. Every stressful relationship steals something from the soul. Every toxic environment weakens emotional stability. Every unnecessary conflict disturbs inner balance. A wise woman recognizes these things early and protects herself before emotional damage becomes permanent. This protection is not selfish. It is necessary. Many women are taught to constantly give, constantly tolerate, and constantly maintain harmony, even when they are emotionally exhausted. But eventually, a strong woman realizes that constantly abandoning herself to keep others comfortable destroys inner peace. So she begins choosing herself not from arrogance, not from coldness, but from awareness. She understands that peace allows growth. A peaceful mind thinks clearly. A peaceful heart loves deeply. A peaceful spirit moves through life with grace instead of desperation. And this grace becomes visible. A woman who values peace no longer needs to prove herself loudly. Her calmness speaks for her. Her presence feels different because she is no longer operating from emotional chaos or insecurity. She becomes selective with her time, selective with her emotions, selective with the people she allows into her inner world, because she understands that protecting peace is a form of wisdom. There is great strength in walking away from situations that disturb your spirit. There is great maturity in refusing to participate in unnecessary drama. And there is deep confidence in no longer needing constant attention to feel valuable. A healed woman enjoys her own company. She no longer fears silence because silence reconnects her to herself. She no longer seeks distractions everywhere because she has learned how to sit peacefully with her own mind. This is real freedom. The world often celebrates loudness, attention, and constant stimulation. But true fulfillment usually grows quietly. It grows through inner discipline, emotional balance, healthy boundaries, and peaceful living. A wise woman understands that attention can attract many people, but peace attracts the right ones. And once she experiences the beauty of emotional peace, she stops chasing anything that threatens it. Because deep inside, she finally understands that protecting her inner calm is more important than being desired by people who bring confusion into her life. That is when peace becomes her greatest priority. Walking away can be an act of wisdom because not every situation in life is meant to be fought for endlessly. Many people believe strength means holding on no matter how much pain they experience. They believe loyalty means tolerating disrespect, emotional neglect, and constant disappointment. But a conscious woman eventually learns that wisdom is knowing the difference between temporary struggle and permanent emotional destruction. There comes a moment when staying becomes more painful than leaving, and that moment changes everything. A wise woman does not walk away impulsively. She usually stays longer than she should. She tries to understand. She tries to communicate peacefully. She gives chances because her heart is sincere. She hopes people will become more aware, more honest, more respectful. But eventually, she realizes that not everyone wants. Some people only want comfort without accountability. This realization is painful because a genuine woman often sees the potential in others. She believes patience can heal things. She believes love can create change. But wisdom teaches her something deeper. Love without respect becomes suffering. Patience without boundaries becomes self-destruction, and this is why walking away becomes necessary. Not from hate, not from pride, but from self-respect. A woman who understands her worth knows that constantly remaining in emotionally unhealthy situations slowly damages the soul. Every ignored feeling creates emotional heaviness. Every repeated betrayal weakens trust. Every moment of disrespect leaves invisible wounds inside the heart. At first, she may tolerate these things quietly. She understands that peace should not require endless suffering. This understanding creates inner strength because walking away is not easy, especially when emotions, memories, and deep attachment are involved. Leaving behind people you once loved, trusted, or believed in requires tremendous courage. It requires emotional discipline strong enough to choose long-term peace over temporary emotional comfort. Most people stay because they fear loneliness. A wise woman leaves because she fears losing herself. This difference is powerful. A conscious woman understands that remaining in unhealthy environments slowly disconnects her from her true self. She becomes emotionally exhausted trying to fix what another person refuses to acknowledge. She begins carrying stress, confusion, and emotional pain daily, and eventually the soul becomes tired. That tiredness is often the beginning of wisdom because pain forces awareness. It forces a woman to ask difficult questions. Why am I continuously sacrificing my peace? Why am I accepting less than I deserve? Why am I staying where my spirit feels heavy? These questions awaken clarity, and clarity creates movement. Once a woman sees the truth clearly, walking away becomes less about losing someone and more about saving herself emotionally. She realizes that staying in constant emotional chaos does not make her strong. It only keeps her trapped inside suffering. True strength is choosing growth even when growth feels painful. A wise woman understands that some doors must close for healing to begin. Some connections only teach lessons. Some people enter life to reveal where stronger boundaries are needed. Not every ending is failure. Sometimes endings are protection. Walking away allows space for healing. It allows the mind to become calm again. It allows the heart to breathe without constant emotional pressure. And most importantly, it allows a woman to reconnect with herself. Because many women lose themselves slowly while trying to save relationships that continuously damage their inner peace. But once she walks away, something powerful begins happening inside her. She starts remembering her value. She starts rebuilding her confidence. She starts hearing her own thoughts. Clearly again, silence returns, peace returns, clarity returns. And in that stillness, she realizes how much energy she was wasting trying to hold together something that was already breaking her. This is why walking away can be wisdom. Not every battle deserves endless emotional sacrifice. Not every person deserves unlimited access to your heart. And not every connection is meant to remain forever. A disciplined woman understands this deeply. She no longer chases people who repeatedly disrespect her spirit. She no longer forces understanding where there is no emotional maturity. She no longer abandons herself for temporary attachment. Instead, she chooses dignity. This dignity changes the way she carries herself. She becomes calmer, more selective, more intentional with her. She stops reacting from fear of loss because she understands that peace is more valuable than forced connection. And once a woman reaches this level of awareness, her entire presence changes. She no longer fears walking alone because she has learned something very important. Loneliness can heal, but constantly betraying yourself to keep others close creates deeper wounds. So she walks away quietly, not to punish anyone, not to seek revenge, but because her soul deserves peace. And a woman who finally chooses her inner peace over emotional suffering begins stepping into her true power. That is when walking away becomes wisdom instead of weakness. Healing transforms pain into clarity because pain, when understood deeply, changes the way a woman sees herself, others, and life itself. Most people try to escape pain immediately. They distract themselves, suppress emotions, or pretend they are unaffected. But hidden pain does not disappear. It stays inside the mind and heart, quietly shaping thoughts, reactions, and relationships. A conscious woman eventually understands that healing is not about pretending nothing hurt her. Healing is about facing the pain honestly without allowing it to poison her spirit. This requires courage, because real healing forces a woman to sit alone with her emotions. It forces her to confront disappointment, betrayal, rejection, loneliness, and every silent wound she tried to ignore. At first, this process feels heavy. The mind becomes restless. The heart remembers everything. Old memories return unexpectedly. The mind becomes restless. The heart remembers everything. But slowly, something powerful begins happening. Awareness grows, and she realizes how much energy she wasted trying to earn love, understanding, or validation from people who were never capable of giving it sincerely. This realization can be painful, but pain that creates awareness becomes transformation, because healing is not simply emotional recovery. Healing is awakening. A wise woman learns that every painful experience carries a lesson hidden inside it. Betrayal teaches discernment. Rejection teaches self-worth. Loneliness teaches inner connection. Disappointment teaches emotional maturity. And through these lessons, clarity begins replacing confusion. At one point in life, she may have tolerated disrespect because she feared losing people. She may have stayed silent when her heart needed boundaries. She may have ignored her intuition because attachment clouded her judgment. But healing changes this completely. A healed woman starts trusting herself again. She listens to her inner voice more carefully. She stops ignoring the discomfort her soul feels around unhealthy people. She no longer romanticizes pain or mistakes, emotional chaos for love. Because clarity allows her to see truth without emotional illusion. This is why healing is powerful. Before healing, emotions control perception. A woman may continue chasing people who continuously hurt her because attachment blinds awareness. She may mistake inconsistency for passion or confusion for deep connection. But once healing begins, emotional fog slowly disappears. And suddenly everything becomes clear. She sees who genuinely cared. She sees who only used her kindness. She sees where she ignored her own value. This clarity changes the direction of her life. Because once a woman truly heals, she stops settling for emotional suffering disguised as love. She no longer accepts relationships that constantly drain her spirit. She no longer seeks validation from people incapable of emotional depth. Instead, she begins protecting her peace intentionally. Healing also teaches patience. A conscious woman understands that emotional wounds do not disappear overnight. Some pain takes time to process because deep wounds affect identity, trust, and self-perception. There may be days where she feels strong and other days where old emotions return unexpectedly. Okay? But healing is not linear. What matters is that she keeps choosing growth instead of bitterness. This choice is important because pain can transform a person in two different ways. It can create wisdom or it can create hardness. A disciplined woman chooses wisdom. She refuses to let painful experiences turn her cold, hateful, or emotionally destructive. Instead, she becomes more aware, more compassionate, more emotional. The people around her, the conversations she entertains, the environments she enters, and the emotions she carries all influence her inner world. And once a woman becomes aware of this truth, she stops giving herself carelessly to everything and everyone. She begins understanding that not every person deserves access to her mind, her heart, or her peace. This awareness changes the way she lives. At one point in life, she may have tried to please everyone. She may have constantly sacrificed her own emotional well-being just to maintain relationships, avoid conflict, or feel accepted. She may have ignored exhaustion and continued giving her time, attention, and emotional support even when nobody truly poured energy back into her soul. But eventually, something inside her awakens. She realizes that constantly giving without protection leads to emotional emptiness. And emotional emptiness is dangerous because it disconnects a woman from herself. A wise woman understands that energy is not just physical. Emotional energy is real. Mental energy is real. Spiritual energy is real. Every stressful interaction affects the nervous system. Every toxic environment disturbs inner peace. Every manipulative person slowly drains emotional strength. This is why awareness is necessary. Because without awareness, a woman can spend years surrounded by people who continuously weaken her spirit while calling it love, loyalty, or responsibility. But a conscious woman begins observing differently. She notices how certain conversations leave her mentally exhausted. She notices how some people only appear when they need something. She notices how chaos follows individuals who refuse to heal themselves. And instead of ignoring these signs, she starts protecting herself emotionally, not from fear, but from wisdom. Protecting energy does not mean becoming cold or distant from everyone. It means becoming intentional. It means understanding that peace must be protected carefully because emotional chaos spreads quickly. A disciplined woman no longer allows every opinion to enter her mind. She no longer absorbs every negative emotion around her. She becomes selective with what she listens to, who she trusts, and where she invests her emotional attention. Because she understands something powerful. What constantly surrounds the mind eventually shapes the soul. This is why a conscious woman values calm environments. She values sincere people. She values honest conversations, emotional maturity, and relationships that feel peaceful instead of draining. She no longer mistakes emotional intensity for deep connection. In the past, she may have tolerated toxic patterns because she feared loneliness or hoped people would change. But awareness teaches her that protecting peace is more important than forcing connections. So she begins creating boundaries. These boundaries are not punishment, they are protection. A healthy boundary says, I will not allow disrespect to enter my peace repeatedly. A healthy boundary says, I will no longer sacrifice my emotional stability to keep unhealthy people comfortable. A healthy boundary says, my energy matters too. This level of self-respect transforms everything. Because when a woman protects her energy, her life becomes clearer. She thinks more calmly. She reacts less emotionally. She becomes more connected to her intuition because constant noise no longer controls her inner world. And intuition becomes stronger in silence. A conscious woman understands the importance of solitude. not isolation from life, but moments of stillness that reconnect her to herself. In silence, she reflects. In silence, she heals. In silence, she regains emotional balance after carrying the weight of the world. Most people fear being alone because they have never learned how to be at peace with themselves. But a healed woman understands that solitude can restore the soul, and a restored soul carries different energy. Her presence becomes calmer, her words become more intentional, her mind becomes less reactive. This is inner power. Because once a woman stops allowing external chaos to dominate her emotional state, she becomes difficult to manipulate. She no longer reacts impulsively to every disappointment or emotional trigger. She pauses, she observes, she chooses her responses carefully. That calmness creates strength. A conscious woman also understands that protecting energy sometimes means walking away quietly. Not every argument deserves participation. Not every misunderstanding requires explanation. Not every person deserves unlimited access to her heart. This understanding is maturity, because emotional maturity teaches a woman that preserving peace is more valuable than winning unnecessary battles. She no longer feels the need to prove herself constantly. She no longer chases validation from emotionally unavailable people. Instead, she invests her energy where growth exists. She chooses relationships built on respect instead of emotional games. She chooses environments that nourish her spirit instead of weakening it. She chooses habits that strengthen her mind instead of draining her emotionally, and slowly, her entire life changes. Because energy affects everything: the quality of thoughts, the quality of relationships, the quality of decisions, the quality of inner peace. A conscious woman understands this deeply. That is why she becomes protective of her mental and emotional space. She understands that once peace is lost repeatedly, rebuilding inner balance becomes difficult. So she becomes mindful about what enters her life, not from arrogance, not from superiority, but because she has suffered enough to understand how precious peace truly is. And once a woman learns how to protect her energy, she stops living from exhaustion and starts living from alignment. That is when her presence becomes powerful without needing to say much at all. In the end, silence is not the end of a woman's strength. It is the beginning of her awakening. It is the moment she stops fighting for places where her soul is not valued. It is the moment she begins choosing peace over chaos, dignity over attachment, and wisdom over emotional reaction. A conscious woman understands that life changes when she starts protecting her energy, honoring her self-respect, and healing the wounds that once controlled her emotions. She no longer seeks validation from the world because she has finally discovered stability within herself. And that is true power, not loudness, not control over others, but mastery over her own mind, emotions, and inner peace. Remember this deeply. A woman who learns how to remain calm in pain, walk away with dignity, heal with wisdom, and protect her peace becomes unstoppable in ways the world cannot easily understand. So if life has tested your heart, do not allow pain to make you bitter. Allow it to make you wiser. Allow silence to teach you clarity. Allow discipline to strengthen your spirit. And allow self-respect to guide every step you take from this moment forward. Keep walking with grace. Keep growing in silence. Keep protecting the peace within you. May your heart become lighter, your mind become calmer, and your future become filled with strength, clarity, and purpose. Good luck on your journey, and thank you for listening.